Hello, welcome to this week's CleaveTech Tech Tip. Well, we're back on the bench this week and there's lots of things on my block in front of me. What am I going to do with them? You'll find out soon. Well, today's tip is all about preparing your race pit box. So mine here is a lid off of my Hoodie tyre truer. Absolutely ideal size for you to carry up to the track to use as your pit box, or get your pit man to keep hold of it near the track or near the pit zone of the track. Why do you need a pit box? Well, occasionally you might crash during a race. I know it might only be occasionally, but it does happen sometimes. There are some crashes going on. And if you are involved in one of those crashes, you might break something on your car. And common things to break might be like gears or braids or body shell, something like that might get damaged and need some repairs. Well, you need a pit box because you need to store all those items to repair your car quite close to where you're working. Or your pit person has to keep hold of those near the pit zone of the track so that they are ready to replace them if necessary. The other thing you might do, you might wear your tyres out during a long race and need to replace your tyres. Well, again, keep them in your pit box so they're all ready. Rather than going all the way back to your bench where your box might be a long way from the track, if you've got your little portable pit box with you up at the track, or your pit person's got them right next to the pit zone, then you can do that repair rather quickly and lose less time in your race. So you might see that my pit box already has got something stuck on the inside of it. Well, it's got a long body pin with a sharp end on it. That's a full length pin. And it's also got a body pin that's cut down to size, that's suitable for the car that I'm currently going to be racing. And notice again, it's got a point at the end. And putting that point at the end of the body pin is very important, which I'll explain in a minute. And you can see I fixed it inside my Hoodie lid with a little bit of bent tape. So it's just a bit of reinforcing tape, bent into like a T shape and stuck to the side of the pit box. Very handy to just easily reach in, pull the pin out, and then you can put it back in your car if you're missing a pin in an accident. So why have I also got the full length pin? Well, the full length pin can also be very useful if you need to make a hole in the body. Let's say you've pulled out the reinforcing of your body. Let's say your body's got damaged and you've actually ripped a big hole where the pin would normally go. Well, you could repair it with some tape, and then you can take your full length pin, push it through that tape to make a nice hole in the body shell, and then put your final pin back in. But to be honest, if you've sharpened your small pin sharp enough, you can generally push that straight in to the body and you don't generally need a long pin. So what else is going to go in my pit box? Well, let's start with an easy thing, spare braid. So again, it's a braid that I've actually used in a car previously. It's got some signs of wear, but I know it fits in the guide nicely. It's all pre-prepared, it's all squashed down ready. It's not a brand new braid that I know is going to be too tight to fit in the guide, etc. You know, it's already been in a car. I know it works, I know it fits the type of guide that I'm using. So that's going to go into my pit box. Because there's always a chance where you either burn a braid out totally, or potentially in an accident, you could even damage the guide and, let's say, lose a braid, and nobody can find the braid, so you need access to a braid to put into your guide. So you've got one with you in your pit box. Next up, I mentioned it before, you might damage the body shell. So you're going to need some tape. This tape could be used to either hold the body shell to the chassis or repair a huge rip in the body shell that's causing an issue down the straight maybe. So you're going to need some sections of tape. So I tend to cut a few different sizes of tape ready. So I'm going to cut 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 couple of pieces, full width pieces, about 6 sections long. So I'll do that now. And then I stick it to the side of my pit box, just to the top edge like that, so you can see it sticking out over the top of the pit box. Notice I've turned the pit box round, and there's a reason for that. That's because I like these pins to be on the right hand side, because I'm right-handed. It's easier to pull them out from there, and I'm going to be putting something else in this space within my pit box. I'm also going to cut a piece of tape that's thinner. So again, similar length, about 6 or 7 sections long. This is the reinforcing tape I've used in a previous video. You might have seen me show you how to reinforce a body shell. I'll put a link on the screen now if you want to watch that video. But again, I'll put a link into the video description for where you can get some of this tape from. So I take a piece like that, and then I tend to cut it a long ways in half, so you've got a thinner, lighter piece in case you need to wrap it around something or just repair a small hole in the body or a tear in the body. It's quite handy to have a smaller piece so you haven't got bits of tape sticking up everywhere if you have to repair a body shell. So I have 4 pieces of tape. They're all ready, and as I mentioned previously, these pins here can obviously pierce this tape if you have to repair a pinhole or something like that on your body shell. So what I'm going to use this space for? Well, I've got a couple of empty tyre tubes here, and I'm going to put those in this area here of my pit box. And I'm going to use some of this stuff, which again I mentioned in a previous video. It's called blue tack. It's the sort of stuff that you use to stick posters up on your wall, perhaps when you were a kid, or you can stick pictures on the wall, etc. It's sort of not really that tacky, but it does stick to things quite well. It's like a putty material. It's not plasticine. It's actually designed to temporarily stick things together, sort of as a putty type material. Again, I'll put a link in the video description of where you can get some from. But I had a lot of questions about this in my last video. So I'm going to take a little bit of blue tack and I'm going to stick it to the back of my tyre tube and stick that in there. Do the same with my other tyre tube. Stick that in there. So I've now got the 2 tyre tubes fixed in my pit box, and even if I shake it, the tyre tubes aren't going to go anywhere and they stay nice and upright. So what am I going to use my tyre tubes for? Well, tyres, of course. I need to be prepared for all circumstances in the race. I need to be prepared for an accident that might happen at the start of the race. I need to be prepared for running out of tyres maybe towards the end of the race, or again another accident about halfway through a race. So I need to make sure I'm prepared with tyres and gears. And I'm going to show you how to get prepared for that now. Depending on the setup of your car, you may have washers on the back axle to get it to the right spacing. Now, I always build my cars with no washers between the gear and the bearing or the bushing. That way, I can always slide the gear all the way onto the car or right up to the bushing, and I know it's going to have a good gear mesh perfectly each time without having to worry about spacing it with washers behind the gear. Now, that's very useful when it comes to quick pit stops, because it means you don't have to actually worry about having a washer between the bearing and the gear, that you've got to, when you pull your axle out, that you've got to then find another washer, or the washer might drop off. You might have a washer on here already. Therefore, you might end up with 2 washers if the washer hasn't fallen off. So it's all a bit of a mess. So I always set my cars up with no washers in between the gear and the bushing or bearing. However, you might need washers on the other side of the gear, or you might need washers on the other side of your car. And you notice this pair of tyres here already has 1 washer on it. So if I was setting this up for a quick replacement, then I'd take my 1 tyre here, I'd put it onto my gear. If I needed washers between the gear and the hub, I could put them on now. I could put washers into there and put that onto my gear. I then use my Allen wrench to tighten it up. Then notice this tyre here has a washer already glued on it, and it doesn't fall off. I've glued it on, and I've used some super glue or cyanacrylate type glue. Just a small tube. I find these small tubes are brilliant to carry in your slot car box, because occasionally it does go off after a while, and if you've got a small tube, it just makes it easy to replace. It's easy to carry, not so much to go off, and they're pretty cheap. I think I got quite a few of these for £1 from Lidl many years ago, and it's still good. So I tend to glue a washer onto my hub, and I might do another video showing you a little technique that's really good to glue washers onto the hubs, but that's for another time. That wheel passes on there nice and smoothly onto my axle, and that's my setup that I'm going to need let's say if I had to replace tyres or a gear about halfway through a race or towards the end of the race, because these tyres are much smaller than my starting tyres. So this is a set that I might use, as I say, halfway or towards the end of the race. Now, in my pit box, I would tend to put first set of tyres, second set of tyres. And what I might do as well is I've got these Allen wrenches. These Allen wrenches have very long tips to them. I'll bring it close to the camera. There we go. So you can see it really close to the camera. They've got really long tips on them, which is really good for going through your tyre into the grub screw without having to put the really thick part of your Allen wrench through the tyre and make a big hole in your tyre. They're great. These are made by Better and Classic in the UK. Again, I'll put a link in the video description of where you can get hold of them via their website or via their Facebook group. But great Allen tips. I really like them. So if this was my first set of tyres, then I would probably leave my non-gear side tyre sitting on the end of the wrench. But I would previously have made sure that the grub screw is not too tight so that the axle won't slide through. It's not too loose that I have to wind it loads of times to tighten it up. Just literally, I slacken the grub screw off enough to allow the axle to pass through, and then that can then sit in my pit box ready to go in case I had to change tyres. But because that's already in a tyre, you need a second one to undo the previous tyre on your car. So if you had a gear failure or say you've run out of tyres, you can use one Allen wrench to undo the non-gear side tyre, slide the axle off, slide your new axle in and tighten it up with your new tyre that's already attached to your Allen wrench, and it's a very quick job. You can do a tyre change in less than 10 seconds, and that might be maybe 2 laps of the track, depending on the class of car. So you don't lose a lot of time for a gear change. You know, you could lose 2 laps in a very poor marshalling incident. So potentially it's worth having everything ready to save you a lot of time, and you're back in the race and you're still in contention. Obviously, this other one here, again, I might just set up with my other tyres. Yeah, you can always slide that on there if it's a set you're not ready to use. So perhaps in my case, because this is my second set, I would probably slide them onto there. I'd probably get my first set ready. So again, tighten it up, just loosen it off, make sure it slides out. So that's my first set ready, my second set ready. And then halfway through the race, during a lane change or something, when I know that I'm probably not going to need this set anymore because they're too big to change to halfway through the race, in a lane change, I'd probably put that tyre back on there and I get this one set up. So now that one is ready to go about halfway through the race. What else might you need? Well, you might need a pair of scissors, because sometimes the body shell could get trapped in the car. It could get trapped in parts, or the interior of the body shell could get wrapped around gears or axles, etc. And you might need to trim something off the shell. So I always put in a very small pair of scissors into my pit box to have with me up on the driver's rostrum, so I can do a quick repair or a quick cut of the body if I needed to. Again, the body could get damaged in an accident and be dragging the track. So you need to cut a small amount of the body clear to stop it from dragging the track and maybe causing the car to pop out at corners. So having a pair of scissors with you is very useful too. And that's about it in my pit box. That's generally what I take up to the track with me. That's generally what I try and get ready for each long race. And I've used them occasionally in accidents, and it's worked out very well for me. You can get what they call pit caddies already made up. Obviously, it doesn't have any parts in it, but it's actually got little compartments for you to put all sorts of things into your little pit box. I've seen one made by Justin Colvin. Again, I'll put a link in the video description to where you can purchase his products from. They're really great. They're a lot of 3D printed products, but really nice products. I've seen them in real life. Very impressive, nice design. It's one of those things that maybe there will be a CleaveTech pit caddy coming, but plenty of other things to do first. But it is on the list of products. So watch out for this space for a CleaveTech pit caddy coming probably sometime this year, I'm hoping. Again, depending on the sort of race you're doing, some people also like to keep some oil with them in their pit box. And I have seen that before, and people have actually got a little holder for their oil. Again, I think you can do the same thing with the blue tack, and you can actually just stick your oil into the corner of your pit box like that, just so it doesn't fall over when you're moving things around. And then you can very quickly just pick that up, oil your car, put it back in your pit box again, and it doesn't fall over, it doesn't go anywhere, and can be quite useful sometimes, especially if you're using cars that use bushes rather than bearings. Having a little bit of oil with you can sometimes help. If those bushings start to seize up a little bit, you can oil your car very, very quickly. Away from my little pit caddy, one of the other things I tend to do, again when a race is just about to start, is I'll turn my soldering iron on. So I'll turn my soldering iron on, I'll set it to my low setting and have it at quite a low temperature, and that setting on my power supply on my slot car box tends to just make the soldering iron just warm enough just to melt solder, so that it's not overheating the tip of the soldering iron too much. It's just keeping the soldering iron tip warm. That way, if I did need to do a quick repair to the car, literally by the time I've got the car back to my box, I'll whack up the temperature on my soldering iron. It will be hot enough to perhaps desolder a motor out of the car, do a quick motor swap, etc. all in time, so I can do it really quickly. But just to have that little bit of heat in your soldering iron to start with is a nice move, especially if you can get away with having some sort of temperature control on your soldering iron. Rather than having to heat your soldering iron up from 0 temperature to try and solder a lead wire on or resolder a motor, joint, something like that. If something's broken on your car, you've got a preheated soldering iron. Again, you don't perhaps even want your soldering iron ticking away at full heat, because that will damage your soldering iron, it'll burn away the tips. So you need some adjustment and temperature on your soldering iron so you can keep it reasonably warm while the race is going on, just in case you need to repair something. I do remember it was very, very useful on one race, because I had a problem with a motor and I had to change a motor, and because my soldering iron was nice and warm, I managed to get the motor changed, a new motor in, within 10 laps. I managed to get back in the race and didn't lose that much time, to be honest. 10 laps, faster motor back in the car again, managed to claw some of that back. I didn't quite win, but it was good enough for second. Well, I hope you found another CleaveTech tech tip useful. It certainly works for me, and I'll see you all again for the next tech tip. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Please hit the C icon that appears on your screen very soon, and have a look at some of my other videos which also will appear on the screen very soon. Bye for now.